My identical twin brother walked into my job interview pretending to be me. He insulted the receptionist, he mocked the company, he did everything in his power to make sure I looked like an unhireable disaster. What he didn't know was that the building had cameras in every hallway, and that karma doesn't need your permission to show up. My name is Alex, I'm 27 years old, and I have an identical twin brother named Adrian. Identical, I should say, only on the outside, because underneath the same face, we were opposites in almost every way that mattered. Growing up, people always said Adrian was the charismatic one, the natural talent, the kid who got everything without trying, good grades without studying, friends without effort, forgiveness without apologizing. I was the quiet one, the kid who built things out of Legos for hours and dreamed about working somewhere that made real technology, real products, real things that mattered. My parents never admitted it out loud, not once in 27 years, but Adrian was always the favorite. He was the funny one, the one with a comeback for everything, the one who could make an entire room laugh with a single sentence. And me? I was the one who did the homework. I want to be clear that this didn't bother me for most of my life. I never needed to be the center of attention. I just needed to be left alone to build my own life at my own pace. But with Adrian, that was never going to be possible. Here's something you need to understand about my brother before I tell you what he did. Adrian didn't just want to win, he needed me to lose. There's a difference. A person who wants to win is competitive. A person who needs you to lose specifically, who feels nothing from his own victories unless they're built on top of your failure, that's something else entirely. I didn't fully understand that difference until the worst week of my professional life. The company I'd worked at for 4 years closed its doors with almost no warning. One Friday, we were a functioning business. The following Monday, there was a padlock on the door and an email about severance that never actually arrived. I spent the next several months applying to everything remotely relevant, hearing nothing back, watching my savings shrink a little more with every passing week. Then finally, I landed an interview at a well-known tech company. Entry-level position, but with a growth track that could genuinely change the trajectory of my career. The kind of opportunity that doesn't come twice. I prepared like my future depended on it, because it did. I built out my portfolio. I rehearsed answers to every question I could imagine. I researched the company's recent projects until I could speak about them in my sleep. I did everything a responsible, serious candidate would do. The interview was scheduled for a Friday, 10 a.m. That same Friday at 9:15, my phone rang. It was the building's front desk. "You're Mr. Alex Turner, right? We're ready for your interview now. Your attitude when you arrived was quite something." My attitude? Yes, what you said a few minutes ago when you checked in. Don't worry, we'll let you know when the manager is ready. When I arrived, I hadn't arrived anywhere. I was still standing in my apartment, tie half-tied, completely confused. And then it hit me. Adrian. Of course it was Adrian. I called a cab, threw on my jacket mid-run, and got there sweating through my shirt. When I turned the corner into the hallway, I saw him. My twin, sitting in the waiting area, my actual portfolio open on his lap, pretending to review documents that weren't even his. I froze. "What are you doing here?" I said through my teeth. He looked up and gave me that specific smile, the one he always wore right before he'd done something genuinely awful. "You weren't going to get this job anyway, Alex. You don't have what it takes. I just sped up the inevitable." I found out afterward, piece by piece, exactly what he'd done. He'd walked into the building claiming to be me. He'd been rude to the receptionist for no reason. He'd implied loud enough for several people to hear that the company was mediocre and that he was only bothering with this interview because nothing better had come along. All of it under my name. I was still absorbing what he'd done when they finally called me in for the actual interview. The hiring manager's expression was cold the second I sat down, like he already had a verdict formed before I said a word. "Mr. Turner, Did you have some kind of trouble stepping out and coming back in? That wasn't me earlier, I said. That was my twin brother. He did something he shouldn't have. Twin? Are you telling me someone impersonated you? Perfect, I remembered thinking. Now I sound unhinged, making up excuses about a body double. I got through the interview anyway. I answered every question honestly. I showed my actual work, walked through my actual projects, tried to sound like a professional and not like a man who had just sprinted 6 blocks explaining away his own face. But I left that building already certain I'd lost the job before I'd even had a real chance at it. What Adrian didn't know, what he had absolutely no way of knowing, was that the building's security system covered every hallway, every entrance, and every square foot of that lobby. 2 days later, my phone rang again. Same hiring manager. "Mr. Turner, could you come by the office for a moment? It's important." I assumed this was the formal rejection, delivered in person out of some strange corporate courtesy. I walked in already composing the gracious response I'd give. Instead, the manager led me into a small conference room and turned on a monitor. It was security footage. Adrian walking into the building, Adrian talking down to the receptionist, Adrian making jokes at the company's expense to anyone nearby who'd listen, Adrian doing everything humanly possible to sabotage an interview that wasn't even his to sabotage. When the video ended, the manager turned to me. "We wanted to confirm it wasn't you. Now we're certain." I thought that was where the story ended. A confirmation. A closed door opened just far enough to let me leave with a shred of dignity intact. It wasn't where the story ended. That's actually where it turned. What your brother did is serious, but the way you handled it, defending your name without attacking his, and the composure you showed once you were actually sitting across from me, that told us something about your character. He extended his hand. "Welcome to the team." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, shook his hand, and somehow made it out of that building before the tears actually landed. Here's the part of this story I didn't expect. Karma, it turns out, doesn't always wait for a dramatic moment. Sometimes it just quietly rearranges the furniture and lets you walk into it yourself. That same week, Adrian applied for a position at a different company, using his real name this time. Standard process, they called for references, and one of the people they reached happened to be someone who had been in that lobby the day of the sabotage, someone who remembered exactly what he'd seen and exactly whose name had been attached to it. Adrian didn't get the job. When he found out I had gotten mine, the one he'd tried so hard to burn down, he called me, furious. "You always get lucky. Things always just work out for you." "No, Adrian," I told him, and for the first time in my life I said it without flinching. "Things work out for me because I don't need to destroy you to feel like somebody." He went quiet. For the first time I could remember, my brother had absolutely nothing to say. I want to tell you what happened after that, because the story doesn't end with a clean, satisfying silence on the phone. Life rarely wraps up that neatly, and I think the messier truth is more useful to you than a tidy one would be. Adrian didn't disappear from my life. My parents made sure of that. Birthdays, holidays, the occasional forced family dinner where everyone pretended the interview had never happened. For months, he was cold toward me in that particular way he'd perfected since childhood. Not angry enough to cause a scene, just distant enough to make sure everyone in the room felt the temperature drop when we were both in it. About 6 months after I started the job, my mother called me upset. Adrian had lost another position, this one entirely unrelated to me, entirely his own doing. He'd been let go for cutting corners on a project and blaming a coworker who had documentation proving otherwise. She asked me gently if I'd talk to him, try to help him figure out what he wanted to do next. I sat with that request for a few days, and I said no. Not out of cruelty. I want to be precise about why. I said no because I had spent 27 years absorbing the cost of being Adrian's foil. The quiet one who existed in our family's unspoken arithmetic to make him look brighter by comparison. I had spent one entire week of my adult life cleaning up a mess he had created specifically to hurt me, in a moment that could have cost me the best opportunity of my career. And I understood finally that helping him now wouldn't heal anything between us. It would just teach him one more time that there were no real consequences waiting on the other side of what he did to people. Some lessons only land when nobody rushes in to soften them. A year has passed since that interview. I'm still at that company. I've been promoted once already, with a second review coming up that my manager has hinted will go well. I have my own apartment now, small but mine, paid for with money I earned without anyone's help and without stepping on anyone to get it. I have peace. I have dignity. And I have absolutely zero need to compete with someone who never once played fair. I think about Adrian sometimes, about what our relationship could have looked like if he had chosen, even once, to be my brother instead of my rival. I don't say that with bitterness anymore, just the kind of quiet sadness for both of us, for the version of this story where two brothers built each other up, instead of one spending his whole life trying to stand on the other's shoulders by pushing him down first. But I learned something hard and necessary through all of it, something I don't think I could have learned any other way. Sharing DNA doesn't mean sharing values, and sometimes the person most determined to see you fail isn't a stranger, isn't a rival at work, isn't even someone who dislikes you. Sometimes he grew up in the same house you did. So let me ask you honestly, if you found out a sibling had sabotaged the biggest opportunity of your life, would you have handled it as calmly as I did in that interview, or would you have walked out? And when my mother asked me to help him afterward, was I wrong to say no? Drop your verdict in the comments. I want to know where you stand. Like this, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to see it today. Because here, one story always leads to another.